Ambassador Krixtal adjusted his ceremonial battle spikes with nervous energy, the metallic scraping echoing through the diplomatic chambers. 3 standard galactic rotations had passed since the Terran delegation accepted our ultimatum, and now they were actually coming. The fools! Did they truly believe they could send one warrior, no matter how fearsome, against the combined might of the hegemony's greatest champions? "Sir, the human transport vessel has docked," reported his aide, Voth Jin, his voice trembling like a hatchling facing its first predator. They only brought one individual. Krixtal's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Perfect. These arrogant humans had walked straight into their trap. For cycles, the galaxy had whispered about Earth's legendary warriors. Tales of their impossible victories, their stubborn refusal to surrender, their uncanny ability to turn certain defeat into glorious triumph. Well, today the hegemony would expose these stories as mere propaganda. The massive chamber doors hissed open with hydraulic precision. Krixtal straightened his posture, ready to witness the arrival of humanity's most dangerous killer. The assembled crowd of alien dignitaries held their collective breath, weapon scanners humming with anticipation. What walked through those doors was not what anyone expected. A human female, approximately 5.5 feet in height, emerged with the most peculiar gait Krixtal had ever witnessed. She moved with careful, measured steps, constantly adjusting a pair of optical enhancement devices perched on her nose. Her attire consisted of what appeared to be a simple brown covering, and she carried a rectangular container that seemed to contain written materials. "Greetings," she said, her voice carrying none of the expected menace or battle hunger. Instead, it possessed an almost musical quality, soft yet clear. "I'm Margaret Holloway, substitute librarian from the Portland Metropolitan Library System. I believe you requested our most dangerous warrior?" The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a vegan dust mite sneeze. Krixtal's eye stalk swiveled frantically as he processed this information. "Substitute librarian?" His translator implants must be malfunctioning. Surely this diminutive creature wasn't the promised champion. There must be some mistake, he stammered, his confidence evaporating like morning mist on Arcturus Prime. "We demanded Earth's most dangerous warrior. Not some keeper of written records." Margaret adjusted her glasses with one finger, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both patience and mild amusement. "Oh no, there's no mistake. You see, you specifically requested our most dangerous individual, and well, I suppose that would be me." The hegemony's war champion, General Scarnash, stepped forward with thunderous footfalls. His massive frame, standing nearly 9 feet tall and bristling with natural armor plating, cast an intimidating shadow over the tiny human. "You mock us, tiny creature. I have conquered 17 star systems. I have personally slain over 3,000 enemies in combat. You dare suggest that you pose any threat to me?" Margaret tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same expression one might use when examining an interesting but ultimately harmless insect. "Oh my. 3,000, you say? That is quite impressive, General. Though I have to ask, have you ever tried to get a group of caffeinated graduate students to maintain proper library etiquette during finals week?" What does that even mean?" Scarnash's confusion was palpable. Nothing. I'm sure your accomplishments are very meaningful in their own context." Margaret's tone carried just enough condescension to make several alien diplomats unconsciously step backward. She opened her container and withdrew what appeared to be a data tablet. "Now then, shall we proceed with your little challenge?" Ambassador Krixtal felt his confidence returning. Surely this was some elaborate human psychological warfare. They were attempting to confuse and disorient their opponents before revealing their true champion. "Very well, human. Our champion will face yours in single combat. Winner takes all. Your planet's surrender, or our withdrawal from this sector." "Wonderful." Margaret clapped her hands together with genuine enthusiasm. "I do love a good challenge. However, before we begin, I should mention that I've taken the liberty of researching your hegemony's laws and customs. Fascinating reading, really. Did you know that according to Galactic Accord 47b, subsection 12, any formal challenge between civilizations must adhere to the challenger's specified terms and conditions?" The color drained from Krixtal's facial membranes. "Yes, but, and according to your own challenge document which I have right here," Margaret consulted her tablet with the precision of a master surgeon wielding a scalpel. "You stated, and I quote, 'Send us your most dangerous warrior to face our champion in whatever manner of combat they deem appropriate.' Did I read that correctly?" General Scarnash's armored plates began to rattle ominously. "Combat. Physical combat. Not some word games." Margaret smiled. The expression was somehow more unsettling than any battle cry the assembled aliens had ever heard. "Oh, but you didn't specify physical combat, did you? You simply said combat. And I, being Earth's most dangerous warrior, get to choose the terms. So I choose a research competition. The collective gasp from the alien audience could have powered a small starship. A what? Krickstahl's voice cracked like a molting shell. A research competition. We'll each be given the same academic question, and whoever produces the most comprehensive, well-cited, and thoroughly documented answer within 24 standard hours wins. Margaret's eyes gleamed with an intensity that made several battle-hardened warriors unconsciously retreat. I trust this is acceptable? After all, you did agree to my terms in advance. Ambassador Krickstahl looked around desperately at his assembled war council. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't how galactic conquest was supposed to work. You were supposed to show up with massive fleets, demand surrender, engage in glorious battle, and then claim victory. Not this. This is preposterous. General Scarnash roared, his voice shaking the chamber walls. I am a warrior. I know nothing of research or academic pursuits. Margaret adjusted her glasses again, and somehow that simple gesture felt more threatening than any weapon. Oh dear. That does put you at quite a disadvantage, doesn't it? Perhaps you should have considered that before challenging a species known for their adaptability and unconventional thinking. The silence stretched on as the full implications sank in. The hegemony had demanded Earth's most dangerous warrior, and Earth had delivered exactly that. Not the most physically powerful, not the most heavily armed, but the most dangerous. Someone who could weaponize knowledge itself, who could turn an enemy's own rules against them, who could achieve victory without firing a single shot. Very well, Krickstahl said slowly, his political survival instincts finally kicking in. What would be the nature of this research question? Margaret's smile widened, revealing perfectly ordinary human teeth that nonetheless seemed more intimidating than General Scarnash's natural fangs. I was thinking something appropriately challenging. Perhaps. Analyze the socio-economic factors that led to the fall of the 17 most recent galactic empires, with particular emphasis on their diplomatic failures and resource management inadequacies. Full citations required, naturally. The color completely drained from every alien face in the chamber. This wasn't just a research competition. This was a systematic deconstruction of everything the hegemony represented, delivered with academic precision and backed by historical precedent. General Scarnash looked around the chamber like a trapped animal, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. I don't even know where to begin. Oh, that's quite all right, Margaret said cheerfully, pulling a stack of reference materials from her container. I brought some starter sources if you'd like. Though I should warn you, I've been preparing for this type of competition my entire career. 37 years of academic research, peer review, and intellectual combat. I've survived budget cuts, administrative restructures, and 3 different library automation system implementations. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the killing blow. I once spent 18 months proving that our city council's proposed library closure would violate 14 different municipal codes, 3 state regulations, and 2 federal mandates. They not only kept us open, they gave us a budget increase. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I am very, very good at what I do. The assembled alien delegation stood in stunned silence, finally beginning to comprehend just how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. This wasn't just clever wordplay or legal technicalities. This was strategic thinking on a level they hadn't even considered possible. Ambassador Krickstahl felt his political career crumbling around him like a sandcastle in a tsunami. The Hegemony Council would have his head for this debacle. They had demanded humanity's most dangerous warrior, expecting some berserker savage they could defeat through superior firepower. Instead, they got someone who had turned their own challenge into an intellectual trap, and the most terrifying part? She was clearly enjoying herself. 23 hours and 47 minutes later, Ambassador Krickstahl sat hunched over his workstation, his eye stalks drooping with exhaustion. Around him, scattered datapads and reference materials created a debris field of academic desperation. General Scarnash lay sprawled across 3 chairs, muttering incoherently about citation formats and peer review processes. Sir, whispered Advoth Jin, approaching with the caution of someone navigating a minefield, perhaps we should consider surrender? Krickstahl's mandibles clicked weakly. In 23 hours, he had managed to cobble together roughly 4 pages of what could generously be called research. Most of it consisted of basic historical facts copied directly from the Galactic Encyclopedia, with absolutely zero analysis or original thought. His bibliography contained exactly 7 sources, 3 of which were the same document cited multiple times with slightly different formatting. Meanwhile, from the human section of the chamber, came the steady sound of Margaret's fingers dancing across her portable keyboard. Click, 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 click. Each keystroke felt like a nail being driven into the hegemony's coffin. How is she still writing? General Scarnash groaned from his improvised bed of chairs. It's been nearly a full rotation. Doesn't she need rest? Food? Sleep? As if summoned by his question, Margaret glanced up from her workstation. She appeared as fresh and composed as when she had arrived, though she had consumed an alarming quantity of a brown liquid she called coffee. "Oh, doing all right over there, General? I know this can be quite taxing for beginners. I once pulled 3 consecutive all-nighters during my dissertation defense preparation. This is actually rather relaxing by comparison." She returned to her work with renewed vigor, and Krickstahl caught a glimpse of her screen. The text scrolled past faster than his translator could process, but he managed to make out section headers like economic parallels between the Zephyrian trade wars and current hegemony expansion patterns and resource allocation failures, a comparative study of imperial overreach. "She's not just answering the question," he whispered in dawning horror. "She's writing the definitive academic work on galactic imperial failure. This could be published in the Journal of Xenopolitical Studies." Vothjin peered over his shoulder at Krickstahl's pathetic attempt at research. "Sir, you've spelled socioeconomic 3 different ways, and none of them are correct." "I know that." Krickstahl snapped, then immediately regretted raising his voice as Margaret glanced over with mild curiosity. "Everything all right?" she asked pleasantly. "I have some spell-checking software if you'd like to borrow it. Though I should mention, I'm nearly finished with my conclusion." The blood in Krickstahl's veins turned to liquid nitrogen. "Finished? But there are still 13 minutes remaining." Margaret consulted her timepiece with practiced efficiency. "Oh yes, plenty of time for final proofreading and citation verification. I always finish early. Gives me time to double-check my sources and ensure proper formatting. You'd be amazed how many promising academic papers get rejected due to improper citation style." General Scarnash raised his massive head from the chair pile. What happens if we lose?" The question hung in the air like a toxic gas cloud. According to the terms of the challenge, failure meant complete withdrawal from the sector and formal acknowledgement of human superiority. But more than that, it meant the end of the hegemony's reputation as a galactic power. Word would spread throughout the galaxy about how their mighty war machine had been defeated by a single human librarian armed with nothing but knowledge and proper research methodology. "Time," Margaret announced cheerfully, pressing a final key with obvious satisfaction. "I do believe that concludes our little competition." The chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of data processors. Margaret stood, stretched briefly, then walked over to the central display terminal with the confidence of someone who had never doubted the outcome. "If I may present my findings," she said, connecting her device to the main screen, what appeared before the assembled alien delegation was nothing short of academic devastation. Margaret's research filled the massive display with charts, graphs, historical parallels, and enough footnotes to choke a Rigelian data whale. The bibliography alone scrolled for several minutes, containing sources in 17 different languages and dating back over 3,000 galactic standard years. "As you can see," Margaret began, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of a seasoned lecturer, "I've identified 43 distinct patterns of imperial collapse, with particular emphasis on the socio-economic factors you requested. The hegemony's current expansion model follows the classic resource overextension pattern exhibited by the Vegan Empire immediately before their economic collapse in standard year 2847. She clicked to the next section with devastating precision. "Furthermore, your diplomatic approach demonstrates the same fundamental misunderstanding of conquered population psychology that led to the Centauri Rebellion of 3156. You see, sustainable conquest requires cultural integration, not mere military dominance." Ambassador Krickstahl felt his career imploding in real time as Margaret systematically dissected every aspect of hegemony policy with surgical academic precision. She wasn't just presenting research, she was conducting a master class in imperial failure, using their own civilization as the primary case study. "But perhaps most concerning," Margaret continued, advancing to a particularly damning chart, "is your resource allocation model. You're currently spending 67% of your gross domestic product on military expansion while investing only 0.3% in infrastructure development. This is identical to the pattern exhibited by the Andromedans right before their complete economic collapse." General Scarnash attempted to stand, swayed dangerously, and sat back down. How could you possibly know our budget allocations? That information is classified at the highest levels." Margaret smiled that terrifyingly pleasant smile. "Oh, it's all publicly available if you know where to look. Your trade agreements with the Outer Rim colonies, your shipping manifests, your recruitment advertisements for military positions, basic economic analysis, really. Any first-year graduate student could have compiled this data." She paused, letting that particular insult sink in before delivering her final blow. "In conclusion, the hegemony exhibits all 17 warning signs of imminent imperial collapse, with an estimated timeline of 18 to 24 galactic standard months before complete organizational failure. My recommendation would be immediate policy reform, diplomatic restructuring, and a fundamental shift towards sustainable development rather than continued expansion. The silence that followed was the kind typically reserved for funeral services. And now, Margaret said brightly, let's see General Scarnash's research. The general's 4-page disaster appeared on screen like a dying animal being displayed for public ridicule. Spelling errors glowed red throughout the text, his arguments contradicted themselves within single paragraphs, and his bibliography looked like it had been assembled by someone who had heard about citation formats secondhand during a casual conversation. Oh my, Margaret said with devastating politeness. This is, well, it's certainly an attempt. Though I'm afraid you've cited the Encyclopedia Galactica as that big book with all the facts in it, which doesn't quite meet academic standards. Ambassador Crickstow's political survival instincts finally kicked in. We acknowledge defeat. The hegemony formally withdraws from this sector and recognizes human superiority in matters of. He struggled to find words that wouldn't completely destroy what remained of his dignity. Academic combat, Margaret supplied helpfully. Though really, you shouldn't feel too badly about this. Research methodology is quite specialized. It takes years of training to develop proper skills. She began packing her materials with the same methodical precision she had displayed throughout the competition. I do hope this has been educational for everyone. Perhaps in the future, your civilization might consider investing more heavily in education and critical thinking skills. The galaxy would certainly benefit from more thoughtful leadership. As Margaret prepared to leave, General Scarnash managed one final question. Are all human librarians like you? Margaret paused at the chamber entrance, adjusting her glasses one final time. Oh goodness no. I'm just a substitute. You should see what our head librarian can do. Dr. Elizabeth Thornton once restructured an entire planetary government using nothing but properly formatted policy recommendations and a comprehensive literature review. She walked through the doors, leaving behind a chamber full of aliens who would spend the rest of their lives explaining to their respective governments how their mighty war machine had been completely neutralized by a human armed with research skills and proper citation methodology. Ambassador Crickstow stared at the empty doorway, his mind trying to process what had just occurred. The hegemony's expansion had been stopped not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by someone who understood that knowledge, properly applied, was the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy, and the most terrifying part? She had been genuinely trying to help them avoid the historical mistakes that would inevitably lead to their civilization's collapse. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the gentle click-click-click of Margaret's keyboard as she began composing her after-action report. He had no doubt it would be thorough, properly cited, and absolutely devastating to read.